Hi folks, welcome to another video from aplaintruth.info. Wanted to get into more about the founding and the ownership of Washington, D.C. I've covered a couple in my previous videos, but I want to get a little more detail. I have a little more information than I posted in my past. So let's get into Washington, D.C. I got some questions here for you. Here's the flag, which very few people know about. Notice the 3 stars, 2 bars. Notice the red and white colors, okay? We'll get into that in a little bit. All right, let's see if you can answer any of the following basic questions about the founding of Washington, D.C. and its ownership. What date was Washington, D.C. founded? Now, we all know July 4th, 1776, the United States of America was founded. But what date was the president that holds the president, the Supreme Court, and Congress that makes the laws and runs the United States of America and all its states, and we pay our taxes to? Come on, folks, what date? Anybody? Didn't think so. Why was Washington, D.C. founded? What was the reason for forming the federal government? And you can get into the Federalist Papers and all that, but what I'm more looking for is the reason for creating the legal framework around Washington, D.C. Okay, here's an easy one. Washington, D.C. was in the state of Maryland. What city in Maryland was it before it became Washington, D.C.? And then who donated the land that became Washington, D.C.? I'll give you a hint. He was the richest man in the United States at the time. And what major university was founded 6 months before and what was to become Washington, D.C.? And who donated that land? All right, who is the White House named after? It's not named because it's colored white. That is not true. Why is the nation's capital named the District of Columbia? It's not after Christopher Columbus. That's the wrong answer. 8. What are the other districts in Columbia? If it's just a district, like an attorney, a district attorney is part of a district of a bigger area. What are the other districts in the Columbia's districts? Okay, what secret society laid the cornerstone for the nation's Capitol building? That could be easy for you guys. And then list the incredible similarities, the many similarities, the incredible similarities between the assassinations of John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln. So here's the Great Seal of the District of Columbia. And you can see here it's in the red, white, and blue. You have a wreath here, and you have the man squaring. His feet are squaring the circle here. There's your Freemason sign. Here's the 2-ball cane. And here's the fasces that he's holding in the other hand. Fasces, 2-ball cane, circle, squaring with his feet, all Freemasonic symbolism, as I said, the red, white, and blue. And here's Persephone, we'll get into a little bit later. Here's the shining hill that Ronald Reagan was talking about, the golden hills on this side. And you look at this thing right here, folks, next to the big shining. And what is this right here? I'll get into it in a minute, but look at that with little vapor trails it looks like coming off. Here's the red, white, and blue eagle holding in its mouth something. The dress, I guess, of Persephone, and she's got her tablet of codes. Imagine that's the commandments. Now look over here, folks. This looks like the state capitol, and look, it's behind an underwater, or a big tidal wave seems to be coming over here. Very strange. And look on the grass in front. Those are spiders or something creepy is crawling, it looks like, towards the Senate building, the White House, U.S. Capitol, with water rising behind it. Here's the date, 1871, I'm giving out, or when it was founded. And then it says, Justitia Omnibus. You can read it one of 2 ways. It means just everyone, or it means just us on the bus. All right, so what date was Washington, D.C. founded? Well, on July 9th, 1790, Congress passed the Residence Acts, which approved the creation for the foundation of Washington, D.C. But an Organic Act of 1871 on February 23rd repealed the individual charters of Washington and Georgetown and created a new territorial government for the whole District of Columbia. So the District of Columbia Organic Act of 1801, officially an act concerning the District of Columbia, it was formally placed the District of Columbia under the control of the United States Congress. Now, isn't this interesting in that it's just Congress, the President, and the Supreme Court that are basically in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. So they got the hens, or the foxes, ruling the hen house. The Congress is overseeing themselves. Isn't that cool? All right, so there's 3 city-states. That's why they have 3 bars here on the on the 3 stars, excuse me, they represent the trilaterals, which we'll get into in a little bit. But the trilaterals is the City of London, the Vatican, and Washington, D.C. These are 3 separate city-states and belong to no other nation, pay no taxes. They have their own separate laws, flags, police, mayors, and post offices. The United States of America does not have control of the federal government. Congress oversees the federal government. This is where your federal taxes go, folks. It's another subject. All right, so the Constitution for the District of Columbia operates under Roman law, under Lex Fori, which bears no resemblance to the U.S. Constitution. In 1871, it created a separate corporation known as capitalized the United States. And you need a Roman Latin dictionary to understand the words and its meanings. But I refer you to the United States Code, note the capitalization, indicating the corporation, not the republic. Title 28, 3002, Section 15, A, B, and C. It is stated unequivocally that the capital letters United States is a corporation. The treasonous act of the 41st Congress allowed the District of Columbia to operate as a corporation outside of the original Constitution of the United States and outside the best interests of the American citizens. The President presides over the U.S. corporation. Notice USA in capital letters. That's why they have a board of directors, a treasurer, a secretary. It's set up exactly like a corporation. If you look at the word president, it has the word resident in between. Res means to reside, a property or thing, and ident is for identification. A capital P is the principle. So it's the principle of the thing identified, and that's what they consider us, as part of their corporation. That's why we're on our citizenships. It is so anyway, so let's get on here. It's capitalization is significant. If you question that at all, you remember Bill Clinton in 1999 getting in front of a federal grand jury and said it depends on what the definition of is. That's what his argument was between oral and vaginal sex with Monica Lewinsky in front of a federal grand jury. This lawyer, Bill Clinton, argued it depends on what the word is, and of course they let him off, and it goes on from there. So in the 1871, it was to create an entirely new document, and the kind of government they created was a corporation, folks. So what we need to understand is that the corporation is about keeping us on our fictitious characters and our straw man, which we'll get into at another time. So our currency and court systems are still based on Roman Latin law. This is why we need a Latin dictionary. Very few can even tell you what the word Latin means. We have Latin America, and very few Latinos can even tell you what the word Latin means. Our money, or one-eye system of exchange, as you see on the back of the dollar bill, was created the first SQV trust by Pope Boniface VII in 1306. He made himself the trustee of Jesus Christ holdings on earth, including the reaping of all lands and souls. These trusts, these three trusts, these SQV trusts were set up in the 1300s and early 1400s. You can look them up. The Roman Pontifex Trust, the Unum Sanctum Trust, under the SQVs, and we're still under these trusts today. A bar is a bar attorney registered to the British Accredited Registry. All United States attorneys, if they practice in U.S. courts, a corporation is a court, they must be registered under the bar. So they're registered under the City of London, practicing law in the United States. If you're a bar member, you're registered under the Crown, and also the registration papers for the corporation is in Puerto Rico. Also, the laws are under maritime law. This is why we go into court. We go on our citizenship, our partnership, relationship, ownership, membership, leadership, friendship. We enter through the docket that's opened by a bailiff. Okay, it's all based on monetary. They've controlled the days of our money system since the days of Alexandria and Cleopatra. This is why we have a river bank and our currency holding our deposit slips in liquid and frozen assets. And the name of the Vatican Church is the Holy See. Okay, and they look at us as human resources. We're just chattel or cattle in the eyes of the law. And your birth certificate was created in 1927, and it's your mother's surname that's used on the document. The hospital is paid by the government to register. Regis means crown, stir means to enroll you at birth. So you came down your water canal and they put your foot on the landmark, so you signed the contract, and they securitized your debt against the debt that was created in bankruptcy in 1933 that we've never gotten out of. The bankers needed collateral. They created the birth certificate. All of us that get registered at the hospital are securitized collateral against the obligated debt held by the banksters of the U.S. government ever since World War I. It's never been paid off. Now, how many of you, what was the name of the city in Maryland before it came Washington, D.C.? The name of the city was Rome, Maryland, folks. And here you see on both sides of their new birthing in Rome, Maryland, is the Virgin Mary. It's Virginia and Maryland on both sides of Rome, Maryland. This was what the Vatican called the New Jerusalem they were creating, and so they put the Virgin Mary of their new birthing on each side. The land today, known as District of Columbia, bore the name Rome, Maryland in the 1663 property records. The Potomac River that bordered Rome in the south was called the Tiber River, just like in Rome, folks. They had 7 hills as well. There's 7 hills in Washington, D.C., the Capitol Hill, Meridian Hill, Floral Hill, Forest, Hillbrook, Hillcrest, and Knox Hill. Now, in biblical prophecy, at the end of which city of the 7 hills will be destroyed? Will this be Rome or Washington? Now, this is an excerpt from the Georgetown Education Library, folks, the Jesuit school. All right, so who donated the land that became Washington, D.C.? Now, these are the 3 of the most infamous unknown characters that founded Washington, D.C. that very few have ever heard of, except if you're in the Jesuit world, they're very much celebrated, and that's the Carroll family. Now, they were the Roman Catholic Carroll family. Daniel Carroll provided the land for Washington, D.C., also Georgetown University, he founded 6 months before. Charles Carroll was the war commissioner, controlling all the executive duties of the military department with its ammunition, supplies of cannonballs, shot, kettles, spikes, and nails to the army. I think that guy was pretty powerful. John Carroll, an intimate friend of Benjamin Franklin, even lived in Franklin's house. John Carroll founded Georgetown University 6 months before, not Daniel. He was also the first Catholic bishop in the United States, John Carroll. So Daniel Carroll was a member of the Continental Congress and a signer of the Articles of Confederation. He was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention and one of only 2 Catholic signers of the United States Constitution. Now remember, the Protestants came across and they were up in north and they desperately did not want the Jesuits to be infiltrating the Catholics. In fact, the Catholics weren't allowed to have religion. This is one of the reasons why they infiltrated and created Washington, D.C. was to separate church and religion so they could practice their Jesuit ways. Now, Daniel Carroll, he was the author of enshrined in the Constitution that powers not specifically delegated to the federal government were reserved to the states or the people. So this is how he changed it from getting the separation of church and state, so the Jesuits could infiltrate. Now, Daniel Carroll later became a member of the Congress, 1789 to 91. He was also a member of the Senate of Maryland, the first one where he served up time until his death. He was appointed by George Washington as one of the first 3 commissioners of the new federal city that is known as the District of Columbia. Those 3 stars above also represent the first 3 commissioners. They have double meanings. All right. So what major university was founded 6 months before? Jesuit Georgetown University, and you notice the emblem of Georgetown is also the emblem on the back of the dollar bill. Wow, isn't that unique? It's the Roman eagle grasping the world and the cross in a state and Roman Catholic church with a banner in its beak. So John Carroll, Daniel's younger brother, was educated on the Jesuit Order in Europe and ordained a priest. He founded a private school and named it after the town where it was located in Georgetown. He went on to be elected the priest of America to become the first Catholic bishop. He was consecrated on the day of the Feast of the Assumptions. In 1781, 1 year before the founding of Washington, D.C., Carroll founded the college, the Georgetown, that later became known as Georgetown University. Now, on a sidebar in this, if you go around most of cities and states, Sacramento, California, nearby where I live, the Freemasons founded the Sacramento 6 months before the state capitol. And you'll find this in many, many cities and many towns. You'll find the Freemasons buildings were founded just months before the cities were founded. You can check it out where you live. All right. So John Carroll went on an expedition with 4 Catholics that bore fruit years later in Yorktown. The largely Catholic-financed French fleet cut off supplies to the British during the War for Independence to General Charles Cornwallis, and Washington was able to force Cornwallis to surrender and bring a war to the end. John Carroll was an intimate of Washington. He wrote a prayer at the time of Washington's inauguration, so they were very, very close. So here we see Washington and the Jesuits and the French collaborating together to defeat the British. But one name, surprisingly or perhaps not so, stands out. In spite of, regardless of the Pope's anathemas and fearful excommunications that sends one to hell for being a Freemason, we find Roman Catholic, Jesuit-educated Daniel Carroll's name among those who are most prominent Freemasons. How is it possible that Daniel Carroll, who represented the top echelons of the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church in America, whose cousin Charles was the most vocal political spokesman for the church, and his brother John, a Jesuit who founded the New American Roman Catholic Church, be a Freemason? The answer lies in a deeply hidden mystery. Charles and Daniel Carroll were both members of New Congress. Charles Carroll was elected to the Senate and Daniel Carroll to the House. They had both sides covered. And this end result gave the First Amendment, which says Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. This was the day of great glory for the Carrolls in the Roman Catholic Church, as they were allowed to infiltrate with their religions. It was called their great work. It was also allowed Rome to function and flourish in America. Now, the Carrolls and Freemasons who were influencing the forming of the new American government brought into existence in year 1789, 13 years, there's that number, after independence was declared, okay? We find a very conspicuous correlation between the launching of the American government and the founding of the American Catholic Church hierarchy. George Washington was inaugurated in 1789, so was John Carroll elected the first bishop of the Catholic Church in this same exact year. Be assured it is no coincidence that the American government, the American Roman Catholic Church hierarchy, and the Jesuit Georgetown College all marked their beginnings in 1789. Okay? So George Washington became their front man, enabled Carrolls to have the American seat of government placed in their own front yard. Jesuit Charles Plowden preached on the Memorial Day when commenting on the American Revolution. This great work may appear to us to have been the sport of human passion, yet the earliest and most precious fruit has been the extension of the kingdom of Christ, the propagation of the Catholic religion, which heretofore, fettered by restraining laws, is now enlarged from bondage and is left at liberty to exert the full energy of divine truth, their truth. Glorious is this day, my brethren, for the Church of God, which sees new nations crowding her bosom. And on it went. So America's national motto is seen on the back of the dollar bill. Annuit coepitus, came to a prayer to Jupiter, appears in Book 9 of Virgil's epic propaganda, the Aeneid, a poem commissioned just before the birth of Christ by Caius Maecenas, the multi-billionaire behind Augustus Caesar, Rome. Objective was to fashion Rome into a imperial monarchy in which its citizens would gladly sacrifice their lives. So, about Latin here, it's King Latinus comes up to form the nation of Latinium. This is where Latin comes from, folks. Fasces. Now, fasces comes way back, and it's a term for fascism. It's back to the Roman days, and they used to call liquor. Here's the three city-states. We have the religion run by the Vatican, the finance run by the City of London, and Washington, D.C. is the military. That's why the U.S. has 175 military occupations and countries out of 185 countries. So we dominate the world with our military. So I want to get into fasces here. Now you notice these sticks on each side where the president is speaking in the Capitol building. These are also called lichors, and we'll get into it a little bit. But it's in the Oval Office leading to the doors and the walkways aboard the corresponding door in the opposite wall that leads to the president's private office. It's because in the Roman Republic, the blade was always removed from the bundle. These are caning rods, folks. These are sticks they used to cane him when they made new laws in Rome, and then there's an axeman's hench on the top of it. Now, the two fasces appear on either side of the flag of the United States, the House of Representatives, on the seal of the United States Senate, on the state freedom atop the United States Capitol. It's everywhere, folks. They've got this thing. See, it's on the back of the dime. These are the caning rods. The axeman hench isn't on this one, but it's all over the dimes. The National Guard uses the fasces seal. The Wisconsin State Capitol, the Lincoln Memorial. Here you see a reenactment of Roman soldiers when they make new laws. The council, general council, they go around and say, anybody object to our laws? And if you didn't like it, they would whip you and cut off your heads if it got too egregious. Here we see Colorado with the one eye and the bundling rod, the axeman's hench, all the signs of the Illuminati. Notice the date 1876. Here's George Washington with the lichar with the fasces right there on the monument. Here it is on the Office of United States Administration and the court systems. They just flaunt it, folks. Here it is on Military Police Brigade, 42nd. You'll also notice on Hitler's work as well. Here it is in Congress with presidents speaking with Nancy Pelosi and the Dick Cheney behind him. And here you see the eagles on top of the flags, the maritime law flags, folks. It's right there. All right. So the Carroll family believed that a Catholic institution could make a major contribution to the political, cultural, educating life of a fledgling nation. This proved to be a major turning point in the Catholic-Protestant relations. So I want to just bring attention to the Jesuit oath here, talking about how they will rip up the stomach and wombs of women and crush the infants. They will use, if they cannot commit what the Pope or somebody's ordered them to do as far as committing murder or anything they are told to do, they will secretly use the poison cup, the strangulating cord, the steel poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons. As long as they're ordered to do it, they will follow their orders. So in 1776, as I said, everything gets established right before the country or state is being established. We see Adam Weishaupt, a Freemason, a Jesuit, came over, and on May 1st, May Day, that's their day, May Day, was the year in which the Jesuit established the Illuminati 2 months before the Constitution was signed. As the Jesuit general put, we have men for martyrdom if they be required. So what they did was they contributed towards the War of Independence by putting Catholics in the war that died in the war as showing they were part of it, when in fact their end game was to get the separate church and state so they could establish their new Jerusalem in Washington, D.C. So a military alliance was formed with Catholic France against Protestant England. Why would France join a distant war? Why would France and Spain go against England unless it was part of the Catholic cause, folks? Before they came, they were having trouble penetrating. They came in through Jamestown. I'm talking about they actually had a boat called the Freemason. The Jesuits came in, and we'll see that in a little bit, into Maryland. But Maryland and Pennsylvania at the time were their only strongholds. And like I said, they only had 2 signers out of the 55 on the U.S. Constitution. But that was enough to get them in. So the church's real agenda was found in a letter from John Carroll to Cardinal Leonardo Antonelli on August 15th, 1790. Although this great event may appear to us to have been the work, the sport of human passion, the most precious fruit of it has been the extension of the kingdom of Christ. I already read that. The Jesuits and their French Illuminatis were the instigators of the War of Independence. This is Washington wrote back in 1790 to Bishop Carroll. Your fellow citizens will not forget the patriotic part which you took in the accomplishment of their revolution and the establishment of the government, or the assistance received from a nation in the Roman Catholic faith is professed. Few Americans know the date or circumstances for the founding of the federal government. The passage of the 14th Amendment, which did not free the African Americans as advertised, but put everybody into a second-class U.S. citizens on their ships. This is what forming the corporation did. It put us on as citizen ships. So the subsequent act approved on July 11th, 1878 was enacted stating that the District of Columbia should remain and continue a municipal corporation. A permanent form of government from the district was established and provided that the commissioners therein provided for should be deemed and taken as officers of a corporation. All right, it's right here, all in the documentation, folks. All right, so who was the White House named after? This is getting into the founding of Maryland. So Catholicism came to Maryland on March 25th, 1634, on the Feast of Annunciation Day. It's the first day of the English New Year. The Protestants, as I said, had the north, and down the south was the Catholics trying to make their beachhead in Pennsylvania and Maryland. All right. Then the Jesuits came in and tried to settle the the Native Americans. The white man made an Indian hut of the colony's first chapel as they infiltrated into the missions, created their missions, and started spreading it across Canada and California. Yet this small group of men in Maryland they're referring to laid stronger foundations for Catholicism in America than did the Spanish in California or the French in Canada. So the White House is named after Andrew White. He's known as the Apostle of Maryland, Andrew White. He founded St. Mary's in Maryland and returned to England to die years later. Maryland President Jefferson Davis, the only Confederate president, as the first to call the building the White House. It was General Davis who accepted financial support from Pope Pius IX that greatly assisted the Southern Confederates against Abraham Lincoln's Union soldiers in the Civil War. So here we have evidence and the letter from President Jefferson Davis received from the Pope saying they will finance the war for the South against the North. They play both sides, folks. Sidebar, the word soldier comes from sold to die, soldier. That is why they are issued dog tags. Every soldier should know this. They're just pawns in the game. All right, so the name White House was not used officially until Theodore Roosevelt had it engraved on his stationery in 1909. Previous was known as the President's Palace, President's House, and the Executive Mansion. Also note there's a White House in City of London and a White House in the Vatican. So why is the nation's capital named the District of Columbia? It's not named after Christopher Columbus. Well, Columbia is the name of the goddess of creation, of war, destruction, and the underworld. She is also known as the goddess of death and pain, Persephone. She is the statue on top of the Capitol building called the Statue of Freedom, which is crowned with pentacles or pentagrams, stars with 5 points. She's also been seen in other statues around Washington, D.C., and she's derived from the imagery of Semiramis, wife of Nimrod and queen of Babylon. It all goes back to Egypt and Babylon days, folks. All right, so what are the other districts? We already covered this, the City of London and the Vatican. They run the power. We have a one world government, folks. Your debt follows you everywhere except for 3 countries, and those 3 countries are North Korea, Syria, and Iran. It's called the Bank of International Settlements in Geneva, Switzerland. They settle all the world's trades every night. There's 5 guys in a room in the City of London that set the prices of gold. It's a one money order. It's a one world order. That's not a new world order they're creating. They already have created it. So they go and place these obelisks as their penises, phallic symbols in every town. You can see the Vesica Pisces around the Oval Office or Ovum Office. So you see in the obelisk in St. Peter's Square in the Vatican, the Washington Monument, and Cleopatra's Needle, they brought all the way from Egypt and put it in the City of London. This is in reference to tribute to the Egyptian pagan god Amun-Re in the middle of Vatican City. The Egyptian-styled obelisk in Washington, D.C. is 555 feet or 6,660 inches, surrounded by the Vesica Pisces across from the Oval or Ovum Office, representing Isis, among other things, the vagina of a female goddess. Now, here's what's really important to understand, folks. In these 3 trinities of the one world empire, they contain 80% of the world's wealth. 80%. Now, we're not talking China, we're not talking India, we're not talking Russia. We're just talking these 3 city-states, these small, tiny city-states. And they're all part of this whole game they play. Now, here Lisa Giuliani gets into really excellent on the corporation. I'll put this in the show liner notes so you can see just what the corporation and the creation of the corporation was all about. But I want to get this wrapped up and get through the other questions here we have. And just also how we're put into a slave state, all of us on our citizenships, and not even able to go cross borders without our passports. And now you're going to have biometric IDs and all the rest of this big brother stuff clamping down. So, question 9. What secret society laid the cornerstone for the nation's Capitol building? Many of you would have said the Freemasons, and everybody's heard George Washington was a Freemason. But look at this, folks. On his tombstone, on his bust here, they've got George Washington, Freemason, and then President of the United States, and a Freemason logo. All right? Who does that unless the Freemasons are running the show? All right? So he was the Freemason that set the first cornerstone, and this is remembered from the United States. This is a quote, a letter to George Washington on the writings of George Washington, quote, "It is not my intention to doubt that the doctrine of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States yet. On the contrary, no one is more satisfied of this fact than I am." So the oath administered to George Washington on his inaugural first president was by Robert Livingston. He was the Grand Master of the Freemason New York's Grand Lodge. The Marshal of the day was another Freemason, General Jacob Morton. Here you see Washington in his full regalia, laying the cornerstone. Here's the triangle. And then another Freemason, General Morgan Lewis, was Washington's escort. The Bible that was used for the oath was from St. John's Freemason Lodge of New York. Washington himself at the time was a master of Alexandria Lodge number 22 in Virginia. Of the 39, there's that number again, 39, 3, 6, and 9, that officially brought the United States government into existence, many of them were Freemasons. 13 are definitely known to Freemasons. There's that number again. Now here's George W. Bush with all his Freemasons, with all their regalia all around them. This is a quote from a Maryland Grand Master, Joseph Clark, September 18, 1793, on the laying of the cornerstone. I have every hope that the grand work we have done today will be handed down to a late posterity as the like work of that ever memorable temple to our order erected by our ancient Grand Master Solomon. Look at all the Freemasons, folks. Everything from Sir Isaac Newton to George Washington. I'm not sure Hitler was. I'm not sure about Clinton. But they're all associated. Many not astronauts are Freemasons. That's how they pulled that off. FDR, definitely. All right, and number 10, the final. Let's wrap this up. The incredible similarities between the assassinations of JFK and Abraham Lincoln. And the reason I put this last is to tie you in is how long the Jesuits have been running the whole show here. So the Jesuits assassinated Abraham Lincoln. I'll put this in the show notes as well from excerpts from John Smith Die in the Adder's Den. But from 1841 to 57, the 3 presidents were attacked by Jesuits as outlined in the Congress of Vienna, Verona, and Chery. 2 died and 1 barely escaped. In 1855, Lincoln was a marked man. 4 years later, he was elected president. As he made his way from Illinois to D.C., he had to pass through Baltimore. He said this to Father Charles Chinquay, who he represented in court in a trial against Catholics against him. Quote, I am so glad to meet you again. You see that my friends the Jesuits have not killed me yet, but they have surely done it when I passed through their most devoted city, Baltimore, Maryland, had I not passed by incognito a few hours before they expected me. We have proof that the company which had been selected and organized to murder me was led by a rabid Roman Catholic called Byrne. It was almost entirely composed of Roman Catholics. More than that, there were 2 disguised priests among them to lead and encourage them, okay? So it goes on. And it was said an Italian barber, well known in Baltimore, a Romanist, was said to have stabbed him while seated in his carriage when he started for the depot. This is from a book by Burke McCarty, The Suppressed Truth About the Assassination of Abraham Lincoln. So this is an excerpt from a letter about John's Wilkes Booth and the assassination. This was at the trial where 10 Roman Catholics were convicted of the assassination of Martin Luther King. John Surratt escaped to the Vatican and hid there till his death, but this is from Mary Surratt, the mother, an excerpt from her letter. Abe must die, and now. You can choose your weapons, the cup, the knife, and the bullet. The cup failed us once and might again. You know where to find your friends. Your disguises are so perfect and complete. Now notice the cup, the knife, and the bullet. These are references to the 4th vow of the Jesuits who I read above. Strike for your home, strike for your country, bide your time, but strike sure. This letter was used to help convict Mary E. Surratt and some other conspirators in the trial of the Lincoln assassination. They wanted to stab him. If that failed, they were to shoot him and blow him up. Those failed, so they tried to poison him. Quote, they were the emissaries of the Pope, the Jesuits. John Smith Die, who was a witness of these events, so tells us. So this Lincoln stated, quote from him, so many plots have already been made against my life that it is a real miracle that they have all failed, when we consider that the great majority of them were in the hands of the skillful Roman Catholic murderers, evidently trained by Jesuits. But can we expect that God will make a perpetual miracle to save my life? I believe not. The Jesuits are so expert in these deeds of blood that Henry the Ninth or the Fourth said it was impossible to escape him, and he became their victim, though he did all that he could to be done to protect himself. My escape from their hands since the letter of the Pope to Jeff Davis has sharpened the 1,000,000 of daggers to pierce my breast would be more than a miracle. And here you see Pope Francis, when he came out a couple years ago and spoke in Philadelphia, he used Abraham Lincoln's lectern to do it. This is how they mock us, folks, and throw it all in our face. All right, so you can read about it more. I'll put all this in the show notes and what. But just to wrap it up, here's the trial of the Surratts, and this is Mary Surratt being hanged on July 7th, 1865. Roman Catholics murdered John F. Kennedy and murdered Abraham Lincoln. Here's the Confederate flag with the keys and the Vatican symbol inside of it. Here's the Pope Francis sitting in front of this hideous, whatever this is, terrible, devil, evil-looking thing that he presides over in his dragon chambers. want to wrap it up with the incredible similarities of the assassinations of JFK and Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846. Kennedy was elected to Congress in 1946. Oscar, stop. 3, 2, 1, go. All right, so I just want to wrap it up with the incredible similarities of the assassinations of JFK and Lincoln. Lincoln was elected to Congress in 1846, Kennedy Congress 1946. Lincoln was elected president 1860, Kennedy 1960. Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln. Lincoln's secretary told him not to go to the theater. Kennedy's secretary told him not to go to the theater. Andrew Johnson succeeded Lincoln, who was born in 1808. Lyndon Johnson succeeded Kennedy, who was born in 1908. John Wilkes Booth assassinated Lincoln, who was born in 1839. Lee Harvey Oswald assassinated Kennedy in 1939. Lincoln was shot at a theater named Ford. Kennedy was shot in a car named Lincoln, made by the car company Ford. A week before Lincoln was shot, he was in Monroe, Maryland. A week before Kennedy was shot, he was with Marilyn Monroe. Lincoln was shot in a theater and the assassin ran to the warehouse. Kennedy was shot from the warehouse and the assassin ran into a theater. Both were killed and presidentially followed by Southerners. Both were shot in the head, and on a Friday, both assassins had 3 names. Both names comprised 15 letters. Booth and Oswald were assassinated before their trials. You can't make this stuff up, folks. All right, that's all I got for now. Thanks for listening. This is A Plain Truth Out. We'll catch you in the next video. Please pass this on. Share the gift of truth with all your friends, family, and loved ones. Peace out.